So, I see you got the blue cardigan on there, man.
Yeah, man.
You doing the Mr. Rogers today?
Yeah, man. Hey, look, man. It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood.
Thank you, take. Love you, take. What?
It's a beautiful day for a neighbor.
Miss you, take. Need you, take. What?
It's a beautiful day in this beauty wood. A beautiful day for a neighbor.
Love you, take. Need you, take. What?
Won't you be ours? Won't you be ours? Won't you be right here with us live on the Prop Culture Podcast? Because I am your host, Matt Trader, and to my left is the man, the myth, the legend, Snooter McGavin, Mr. Shane Snoops, ladies and gentlemen.
Woo! You said something to me funny, and I want you to repeat that. Is like, how important is WrestleMania to you?
Well, it's funny because I've always told people that my favorite thing to watch in sports is WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Right. And to me, if they aired WrestleMania the same night as the Super Bowl. Now, the Vikings have never been in the Super Bowl, so I really have nothing to base this off of.
Right.
But unless the Vikings were in the Super Bowl, I would watch WrestleMania over the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And actually, it's funny because I was kind of almost faced with a similar scenario this weekend because we had Duke versus North Carolina. That's the biggest game in college basketball in the Final Four.
Yeah.
On Coach K's last ever game. And I basically was still like, sorry, WrestleMania's on. I'm not watching that. No offense to the people who did. It's just I love WrestleMania. And I know you feel the same way.
Well, we were at I was at your house this weekend, and literally it was WrestleMania all the way through and through. And I mean, I actually was fortunate enough in I think it was 2018. It was in New Orleans. I went. And I've been to almost every sporting event you could go to. There is nothing like WrestleMania.
I've never been, so I can't even imagine that energy.
I was tired. Like, I actually felt like I wrestled at that point. Yeah. Like, we went to it, and it was at that time it was one night.
Yeah.
It was 8 hours. It was like you put a work like cheering. You have no voice.
Yeah.
You were literally dead tired. But it's cool because there is so many groups of fans that come, and this is the thing about WrestleMania that's different than anything else. WrestleMania attracts the older fan, the guy who's like us, like the people who are like, oh, we love this nostalgic factor. That's what draws us back to it is from our childhood. That's the people that go. It's not, you don't see a lot of kids there. You really do not at WrestleMania. You do not see. If you play it back, there's probably some kids there, but the majority of the crowd is probably around our age.
A bunch of big dorks like us, basically.
Yeah, basically. And it's so cool. That year we met people from England, and they had flown in, and it's funny because they were like, you make so many plans, you see the same people over and over, especially in New Orleans.
Yep.
And we were at Pat O'Brien's, and we're making plans like, hey, after the show, we'll meet you back here, this and that.
Yeah.
Dude, have a show. I went home.
That was the streak WrestleMania too, right?
No. That was
Daniel.
That was Brock Roman.
That's right.
That's when he busted him. He busted him the hard way. He elbowed him, which was crazy because I was sitting so close, you could actually see him connect on the elbow, and it split him. You could see, we were 3 rows back, and then three over from the entrance. So literally, you could reach out and touch, anyone coming down, and the amazing part is I saw Undertaker live.
Yeah.
Take.
Thank you, take. Miss you, take what?
I saw him live, and that was the most. I think that moment right there was the most electric moment I may have ever lived. Just when the lights go off, the music comes on, it was that intense.
Yeah.
Everyone in the crowd, it was so electric. I will never forget that moment. And dude, as a kid, I was terrified of the Undertaker.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He was pretty scary as the Paul Bearer promos and stuff like that. It was kind of scary, right?
It's funny. I think my buddy was actually at that one too. My buddy Billy Gilman, who the guy who built the Hoop Tea brand, and now works for Budweiser, right? So he's been to pretty much every sporting event you can go to.
Yeah,
and he basically said WrestleMania is by far the best live event. He's been to Game 7 of the World Series.
Yeah.
So he's like, there's nothing that replicates it.
Well, what they do better than anyone else is they produce a show, and it's not like they just put a bunch of stuff together.
Yeah.
like a common fan, like my mother, my father, my sisters all watched WrestleMania this weekend because Stone Cold was coming back. They put together a complete show for the people who watch it episodically, weekly, and the fans that come back every year for WrestleMania, which is amazing to think about because how many places do that? Like, how many events have that kind of drama, the theater that's involved with wrestling?
Well, it's funny because I've always said that, like, when you watch WrestleMania, it's like watching the season finale of your favorite show acted out on a Broadway stage in front of 100,000 people. Yeah. That's essentially what it is. And, like, the pageantry of it, to me, is the best part. Like, even like, I could tune in and watch it, and some WrestleManias are way better than others. Yeah. And some I'm like, the matches weren't that great. They didn't really do much for me. But the pageantry just can't be replicated. The stage designs. Like, I'm the guy that's like Googling the leaks for the stage designs on Monday before WrestleMania. Yeah. And it's like I told you, and it's something I don't even know if you ever picked up on it, but like when America the Beautiful comes on.
Yeah, you said that this weekend.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, well, I guess they're going to do the national anthem. I'm like, no, America the Beautiful, that's their thing. They don't do the national anthem. And to me, that's like one of the most special parts of the weekend. Yeah. Like, I love it. It opens up you get to see all the fans on that initial aerial shot. And it's like 100,000 people that are all there for this common, same purpose and same love. Yeah. And then they break out America the Beautiful. Yeah. And there's just something about it. It reminds me of my childhood when I first saw my first WrestleMania. Yeah. You know, and it's just, it's cool, man.
I think like that's what WrestleMania kind of does for, anybody who grew up watching it. WrestleMania has the same effect. It's like, dude, me and you kind of just, we get entrenched in it, and it's like Christmas almost for us. Like we legitimately, like today it feels like the day after Christmas. Yeah. Like we don't know what to do. We're like, what do we do now? Like until next year, like until when Santa comes and, comes again. Like I had went on to WWE shop over the weekend. I called you and I was like, dude, I bought like $350 worth of stuff that I didn't need. Like I didn't, but like you get on there and then you just get so immersed in it, and you're like, okay, whatever, dude, I'm going to do it. And I told you, like the funny thing is on WrestleMania week, when you go to WrestleMania, they open the WWE shop. It's called WWE Access. Yeah. And they will rent out like event. It's like them renting out the full Civic Center, bigger probably than the Civic Center.
Just for merch.
And then merch. It's just all merch. And it's stuff you've never seen before. Yeah. And like they kind of do their like Hall of Fame stuff, like the memorabilia that they've been collecting and stuff. They post that up. It's one of the. I bet you probably $1 million. You will go, even if you try not to buy something, you will buy something out of the store. You have to.
See, I'm not like the big merch guy. And it's funny because I'm a huge Pearl Jam fan, and I'm not going to segue out of wrestling, but I'm a huge Pearl Jam fan, and they are like the biggest act when it comes to merch. Yeah. Like people literally will line up days in advance to be like number one in line just so they get the newest poster. Yeah. And it's like, you're like that with wrestling. Yeah. And I remember first time I ever went in your office, I walked in, I was like, oh, yeah, but Bob's like, hey, you got to meet this guy, Shane. And I walk in your office and I'm like, it's like a shrine. Yeah, to the WWF or WWE or whatever you want to call it, or Ric Flair.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like I'm there probably 90% of the time. Yeah, so it's like my man cave, like in essence, because I'm there. I'm working 7 days a week. Yeah, and when you're in the office, you just want to be comfortable. And like what I realized too is like wrestling is one of those things that takes my mind off of like everything else around for those. Yeah. So Saturday and Sunday this last weekend, like for those 6 hours that they were, so it was 12 hours, but 6 hours each night. It just like nothing else mattered. Like it was that you were so engulfed in that, and it's so
when
funny.
Nothing else matters. Love you, take me, you take what? But no, it's funny you talk about wrestling taking your mind off things and being your escape, because I've always said that wrestling is like my therapy. Mm-hmm. I think there's so much stuff on TV and so much content. It's so intense. Like wrestling is mindless. Mm-hmm. It's one of them things that like you don't have to think about. So like we all work really strenuous jobs, and it's good to come home and not have to think about anything. So I always say, man, like that's kind of it's really therapy, is that the mindless element of wrestling, to put it on. And it's funny because I don't consume it like I used to. I think we had this conversation over the weekend. Like I would love to watch countless hours of wrestling, every promotion,
Right.
but I really don't have the time to devote to it like I used to. In fact, really, the majority of the time, I'm fast forwarding the episodes just to kind of keep up with the storyline.
Yeah.
To get to WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Right? Because because WrestleMania is so important to me. It's the ultimate payoff. It's Christmas, like we talked about. But
Yeah, but I think there's a difference in kind of we had this same conversation this weekend too about appreciating what you have and what you had.
Yeah.
The things of the past and the things of the present. It was actually a LeBron James, Michael Jordan talk.
yeah,
But really, we can compare it to like what we were talking about and what we were doing this weekend. We were watching Stone Cold.
Yeah.
And then Roman Reigns is the new era of that. And
Yeah.
that night. And, it's being able to appreciate both of those guys in both of those eras. Like, again, my parents do not they watched wrestling when my father watched wrestling or when we were kids. Like, they're not the avid wrestling fan, but they tuned in both nights because Stone Cold, you know?
Yeah.
So it's appreciating both for what they are. And what's crazy to me is like when you talk about like, cause if you search for, like WrestleMania stuff, you get all these reviews, and I think it's different now than like when I was a kid, and I was growing up during the Attitude Era. It was like, I never really cared about any of that stuff. I didn't hear any of those forums, those podcasts, those things where people were talking negative. I appreciated it for what it was, you know? And Stone Cold coming out and beating up his boss, Mr. McMahon, it was great. You were like, he was the embodiment of what everyone wanted to be. Everyone wanted to go tell their boss, hey, go, F off. And he did that for a whole genre. Yeah. And nowadays, it just seems like, if you listen to the internet, they're like, oh, well, he's too old. He's this and that. It's like, appreciate what you got, while you have it, right?
Yeah.
And so for him coming back, I thought it was it made my weekend. And I said, by the end of it, my biggest thing was you could see the smile on his face when he was walking out last night.
Yeah.
You saw he was just happy. At that point, he did what he wanted to do. He came back, had a great match, and then did a little, had that little mess around scene with Vince and Stunned and all that stuff. Stunned Pat McAfee.
They booked him so perfectly. Look, the first night was amazing.
Yeah.
And Owens did a great job with his promo work to get to that match. I mean, just flawless. But the second night surprise with him encountering McMahon again to come and really bring his whole career full circle.
Oh, yeah.
And then McAfee was already over. I mean, it was just, they booked him flawlessly.
Oh, and
of course, everybody today is an armchair booker, like you're trying to say. So maybe they didn't.
Well, that's what I mean. People are like, well, for a 58-year-old man, he had a 3-star match. It's like, dude, I don't care about any of that.
Yeah.
Never did care about it. It really, for me, it's all about how the match makes you feel.
Yeah.
Not about stars and I'm not looking for the best dude who can do tricks in the ring and cartwheels and flips. Yeah. Like that to me doesn't interest. What captivates me is like when you watch that trailer, quote unquote, before they go on that promo, and if it hooks you, they've done their job.
Yeah.
And they had one of those, and even growing up, that was one of the coolest things was they would put a 2-minute trailer together.
Yeah.
Of the past 6 months of those two guys or whatever, that feud. And you could be caught up right to speed in that 2-minute trailer.
Yeah.
Like you said, wrestling is a mindless thing. People try to make it something more than it's
exactly.
not.
It's like turn your brain off to it.
Yeah.
Like just turn your brain off and just let it go, right? But it's hard to because we're so invested in it and we grew up around it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's kind of the biggest challenge of everything, man. But, it's funny. Like, I like good matches, and we talked about this because I do want to see a quality match. I want to see a 5-star match.
Yeah.
But I don't need all that. WrestleMania, I want to see a Cody Rhodes, Seth Rollins quality match.
Yeah.
And we got that. But what really makes wrestling is the story. And the story comes from the promos before the matches.
Right.
That's like when I talk about fast forwarding.
Yeah.
When I'm fast forwarding, the majority of the time, I'm not watching every match on every Monday Night Raw.
Yeah.
I'm actually watching the promos so I know the storyline that builds up throughout the year to get to this point.
Yeah.
So people can discount the entertainment portion of it or call, WWE's not pro wrestling and all this bullshit. To me, I don't buy that. Like, you can call it pro wrestling or you can call it sports entertainment. At the end of the day, it's still the same thing.
That's exactly.
And if you want to talk about pro wrestling work, honestly, WWE has a more really, and this is probably a hot take, right?
Yeah.
But WWE probably has a more traditional pro wrestling type product in ring than these other people who are out there doing circus stunts and saying, well, it's pro wrestling.
Well,
why? Because that's the nomenclature you want to use?
Well, and that's what, that's my whole point is like, and again, I grew up with Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Steve Austin, Undertaker, and they were all technical ring workers. They went into the ring and they worked a body part. They worked you, and it wasn't. They weren't going on the top rope and doing a 480 splash.
Yeah.
And getting the crowd to stand up and go, holy shit.
Which is awesome.
But it's like,
Not
I don't
every night.
need that. I would prefer to see this guy get stomped out, like Stone Cold. He stomped, he put Kevin Owens in the corner. Yeah. And he milked the crowd perfectly.
Oh,
I mean, it was 1, 2, and then he just picked it up, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. And that was what we were used to. And I mean, even the brawl, when they started fighting, going back and forth, that to me feels real. What doesn't feel real is watching two guys do acrobatics in the ring. Yeah. If I wanted to watch that, I would just watch, I can watch that on the Olympics. And that's no offense to anybody. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it. I'm saying from the standpoint of I get tired of people saying that wrestling, like what we watched last night, well, that's just fan service, 2-star, 3-star matches, and then you hear stuff from these. I've tried to watch some of these 5-star matches, quote unquote, and I'm like, dude, they're just flipping around. I guess if you're talking from the standpoint, they're doing moves that no one's done, or that's the complicated, that are very complicated move sets, flipping off the rope, the top rope. I got it, but that's not what I like. I like the Attitude Era stuff where it is gritty.
You're more into the ring psychology. Yeah. The Jake Roberts of the world. Yeah. You know what I mean? The Hulk Hogan where, he had 5 moves, but he could literally work a crowd. I mean, it says a lot when you can work a crowd off just a couple of moves. Yeah. And I'm not taking anything away from the guys who's got a lot of moves because I like that. And I want to see big stunts. Yeah. 100%. Do I want to not see somebody do a 550 splash off the top of a balcony on the 3 tables? No, I do. Yeah. I don't need it all the time.
But I don't need it every day.
I don't need the hot shot. Yeah. You don't got a hot shot every single thing. But that's the thing about wrestling. Again, there's something for everybody. Yeah. Okay, what you like might be different than what I like. Exactly. It's a variety show, and I don't want to be the type of guy, because if I am, and we are, I should say, if we're the type of guys that are sitting there trashing another promotion, we're no different than the other people that we're singling out right now, because honestly, man, my generation of fans really, I think, were the Smarks, so to speak, the smart marks, the people who were almost the people who were too smart for the booking almost. Yeah. We started it all because we were the kids who were in the libraries during, class on scoopcentral.com trying to get all the dirt sheets so we could find out what was going to happen ahead of time. Yeah. And we became smarter than the bookers, and it made things so challenging to book. Yeah. It was a great thing, but I think we almost became the biggest part of the problem with today's wrestling. Yeah. And it's like I told you the other day, I was always the Smark. I always I think the Smarks majority of the time like the heels. Yeah. It's cool to like the heels, right? Yeah. And somewhere along the line, when all that stuff was going on with Roman, where they were booing Roman because we felt like he was being pushed down our throat, my son was old enough now where he starts watching the product. Yeah. And I grew up in the era of Hulk Hogan. I grew up, about 10 years before you did. So I grew up with the Hogans, the Savages, Hogan versus Andre. And I grew up on that good versus evil. There was no blurred lines. Yeah. And I wanted him to have that type of hero. And I saw the way they were treating Cena. They booed Cena. Now they're starting to do the same thing to Roman. And I'm like, all right, look, man, when I'm at a show with my son and he wants to root for the good guy, and I'm not telling a fan they can't boo. Yeah. But it's really starting to confuse these kids. And, he's like, Daddy, why are they booing Roman? So I actually started rooting for Roman because of that. Yeah. He felt like the anti-smart guy to me. Yeah. So I liked him before they turned him. And now they turned him, I really like him now.
Yeah, well, it fits his character.
But
it fits him. And I think also, I grew up So, when the Attitude Era started, it was 97.
Yeah.
And like, so my father had gotten me into wrestling early.
Yeah.
Like you're talking about like, I wasn't born when Hogan was, at his peak powers.
Yeah. Yeah.
But my father had every VHS, every pay-per-view. And like, that was what we did.
Yeah.
On days off from school or like summer days. Like I could go to the library and just pop a VHS in and watch the Royal Rumble, watch WrestleMania, watch these things. And my father had all that stuff for me. So it was like kind of ingrained in me from when I was a kid. Like I just loved wrestling. But I was so fortunate that being a kid in that era of wrestling, it was so different, man. It felt real. Being 7 years old and watching a guy drive a beer truck down and spray you know what I mean? Like,
see, I was a teenager when that was going on, so I couldn't imagine what you were feeling.
So, and that's when your kids were running around this weekend and they were saying certain things at the TV, I'm smiling because that's what my father used to have. What they would call like it was like cookouts or parties. Yeah. For the for every pay-per-view, there was one pay-per-view a month.
Yep.
And he would have all the boys over. And then the kids were there. We were glued to the TV as well, and it was such a cool thing to kind of share with my father and my siblings, my sister. Like it's so. I was on the phone with you this morning, talking before we got here, and I said, "Hold on." What did I say? I was like, my sister's playing the Stone Cold music as soon as she walked in the door.
Your family reminds me of the Page movie, the fighting with my family.
Yeah.
You guys remind me of that. It was
like
awesome.
But it was again. I was so fortunate that's how I came into wrestling, and I appreciate it for that genre of what it was. This whole new thing, I'm not saying it's not everybody's cup of tea. I still appreciate Roman for who he is. Yeah. I appreciate AEW, all those guys for what they do.
Yeah.
It's just you have a cup of tea that you like and you don't.
Yeah.
And mine is I like to see Brock and Roman because those are two guys that are 6'5", 265 that feels real.
It's a shame that match got cut short.
But it is. But those two guys feel real to me.
Yeah.
That's what we grew up on. When Stone Cold got in the ring with The Rock, I mean, it was just electric.
Absolutely.
That was an electric feeling. Triple H, all those guys.
Yeah.
I mean, and thank you, Take.
Miss you, Take.
Love you, Take. Need you, Take. What?
The thing about those guys where they all had character. Dude, think about it. At that point in time, the Attitude Era was basically reality TV.
100%.
That's literally what reality TV is at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all reality TV is scripted.
Yeah.
WWE was the first scripted, basically reality show. If you want. I mean, they took a piece of everything they could. Jerry Springer, Maury, everything.
Yeah,
I mean, the storylines some of them were crazy.
Yeah.
Like looking back on it.
And see, I grew up in another era. And it's so like going back to like why WrestleMania means so much. It's like talking like what you're saying is, it's more than just the product. Yeah. It's community.
Yep.
It's growing up, putting yourself in that childlike mind frame of, I remember when my dad had people over and it was this experience. And like when you watch WrestleMania, it brings you back to that time.
Yeah.
And even if it's not great, you still get a little bit of that feeling that you're searching for, with that nostalgia element. But I grew up in the era, so my grandmother got me into wrestling.
Yeah.
And I grew up in the 80s, so like it was hard not to be into wrestling.
That was cool. It was wrestling. Hogan and Flair were
they geared everything to us back then, from cartoons to, we were really the first commercialized generation of kids.
Yeah.
Growing up in the mornings, you would watch Saturday morning cartoons. You'd get up at like 6 o'clock in the morning and start watching like Denver, the Last Dinosaur, the Chipmunks. And then by 10 o'clock, Superstars would come on.
Yep.
So like you're watching wrestling, every morning at 10 o'clock, and they only had like an hour. And most of the time it was like, basically it was all jobber matches, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And enhancement matches.
It was like Hank, the handyman that would come out.
But my grandmother loved it, and we have a distant relative, Salvatore Bellomo.
Yeah.
So that was like my grandmother's distant relative, and when my parents would go out on date nights on Saturday nights, they would leave me over at my grandmother's house with her and her two sisters. They're these like three Italian ladies.
Yeah.
And they would sit there and cook me and my cousins like these big elaborate, Italian dish, meals, and we'd sit there and eat pasta and watch Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan on Saturday night.
Yeah.
And they loved it. Oh my God, when Coco Beware would come out or Junkyard Dog, like they would like literally mark out.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I still watch wrestling to this day because it reminds me of my grandmother.
Yeah.
You know, in those times. And that's why it's special to me.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just I don't know, man. It's people don't get it. I don't think when they see a 41-year-old that still watches wrestling, but that has a lot to do with it, you know.
I think we all have, as humans, we're all weird.
Yeah.
We all have something weird. We you know, a weird.
That's why we're doing this
hobby or
show.
Yeah, exactly. We all have
like-
something that's, but you know what? To your point, it goes back to like that mentality. Like it feels like, you know how like when you have kids and all that stuff, you want to pass that down. I'm sure like how you felt the same thing at WrestleMania makes you feel is you're like, and we've had this conversation. You're like, dude, I want my kids to be in wrestling as much as I am, because
I don't know if I want that for them, but
no, but it's so funny because like it's just that brings that feeling of community, and it brings up a family. For me, that's what it does for me. And like it's just funny because, you know, my sister calls me yesterday after Saturday's match, and she's like, dude, it felt like my childhood. Like, and we all, so both my sisters basically said the same thing. It's like, feels like my childhood all over again. Like watching Stone Cold go out there, and, you know, he got on his mic work, just, you know, everything about him, his psychology of working the crowd. Like, if you want me to stomp a mud hole in this sumbitch, give me a whole hell yeah. And everybody, I mean,
dude,
he was electric. I mean, when he said that, I mean, even I was like, oh, hell yeah.
Like, we were loving it. I think everybody, even the people who are at my house that didn't even care about wrestling, were into that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, because it just brings you there. It just takes you to that point. You're like, oh. And I remember we were talking before that, and I remember everyone was talking, and we go, all right, everybody, this is Stone Cold. Like, everyone be quiet. But it was just such a cool weekend, and
but it's fun. I do want my kid. I'd love to see my kids into it, and I try to integrate them in it more. They're not into it like I was. And, I mean, and there's a lot more things for them to watch nowadays. The YouTube, the Fortnites. So, you know, back in the day, we only had like 3 channels. So, you know, if I wasn't watching wrestling on Saturday mornings, then I, you know, with WWF, then I probably would pick up TNA in the afternoon, or not TNA, excuse me, that's disrespectful. And NWA, I'd be picking up NWA, you know, Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes and the Steiner Brothers. And of course, I'm a huge Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert fan. That's probably one of my favorite wrestlers, if not my favorite of all times. Shout out to Hot Stuff International, R.I.P. Eddie Gilbert.
R.I.P.
Right. But anyhow, so I want my kids to be in it, right? So it's funny because there's one WrestleMania and a kid's holding a sign, right? And the sign says, "I'm not as into this as my dad is." And it's like, I'm like, and that's kind of how I feel like my son's probably going to be. And speaking of signs, so I haven't gone to a lot of events, but I was at the Royal Rumble in Philly, where Roman won, and the crowd just destroyed him for winning, right? And I actually made a sign that night to pay homage to Gorilla Monsoon, because that's my guy I grew up watching.
I remember that.
And it said it's Pandemonium Gorilla. And it had a panda bear. Right. And then it had the picture of the Mona Lisa, and then Gorilla Monsoon. And you could see it when I'm in the background.
I remember that.
You know, I think I would like to go to more events just so I can make signs. Well, like that would probably be the reason I'd like to go, because
I've already pre-reserved for WrestleMania next year. Like I've already said. I mean, I tried to get you to commit over the weekend.
It's tough, man. But I'd like.
You were
to,
like, I can't. I was like, shake on it. He's like, I can't do it. So, I mean, I just listen. The one thing that my sister said that resonated so much with me, she was like, you only have so many opportunities in life to see those people. Like,
you're right.
Before they retire, before they walk away. And she was like, we never got to see Shawn Michaels, and we should have went this year for Stone Cold, but you know, we never got to see certain people, like before Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, all these people before, you know, and God rest their souls, Scott Hall, you know, you didn't see them. And so it's one of those things where I'm like, as I get older, again, I cherish these memories. So, you know, when we went to that WrestleMania in 2018 in New Orleans, dude, I met Stone Cold. We did like a photo op and all this stuff with him, and it was such a, I mean, again, just an amazing experience.
Who all went? Your sisters go too?
Yeah. So my oldest sister went with me then, but now they're talking about everybody wants to go to the one in Los Angeles because we all just grew up on. Dude, again, my father created like these monsters of just like wrestling was so real to us.
And your dad, you were telling me that your father was worked at KB Toys.
Yep.
And used to own baseball card shops.
Yep.
Which is funny because my uncle and my cousin, the one I mentioned on I think episode 3, my cousin, they owned baseball card shops back in the day, and they were big into wrestling too.
Yeah.
So that was one of the other reasons I was into wrestling too. But
so imagine, and at that time KB Toys, all the toys are coming, all the action figures, all of the everything, dude. If it had Stone Cold or The Rock on it, it was in my house.
Yeah.
Like I had everything wrestling at that point in time. I was so into it. It was probably not good for me.
Yeah.
Because, again, like I thought it was real.
Yeah.
So, I won't get into it. There were some stories that you guys told.
It's still real to me, damn it. Still real to me, damn it.
Last week with Tommy and going JWO, bringing it back to that.
Yeah.
But, like, that's how into it. Like, I thought those things were real. Like, you could hit somebody with a chair.
Yeah.
And they would be okay.
See, that's
that's
wild era that you grew up as a kid in that era, because like that era almost was the era where it was almost geared towards the teenage kids that they already developed, at a young age. So, like I said, like I grew up with Hogan, but then they kept us around, during the Attitude Era because we're older now, so you got to have a more edgier product, exactly. And it was wild back then. It's funny because, I talk about community and how wrestling always meant something to me from a family dynamic, but also like some of the best WrestleManias ever, if not the best ever, were ones like where I was getting together, with my friends when I got older.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We'd all get together and have these parties, and I mean, there was a lot of wild stuff going on. I mean, WrestleMania was a big deal back then. And so,
It still is. I think it really still is like a huge event, and I think wrestling overall can I mean, as crazy as it sounds, Stone Cold is a role model.
Yeah.
But if you watch did you ever watch those docuseries?
Oh, yeah. Watched
like
all of
when you watched what he went through to get there. I mean, the dude pretty much destroyed his whole personal life was destroyed to be the #1 wrestler on top of the mountain. Like, and again, I don't think you'll ever see anything as hot as he was in terms of like status.
Yeah.
I don't even think Hogan was as over as Stone Cold was at his peak power.
I don't know.
Stone Cold over Jordan. That's exact. Like, dude, he got into the ring with jean shorts and a t-shirt, double knee braces, and beat the piss out of Kevin Owens.
He was. I mean, but that's like saying he's. I don't know. That's a tough question. That's having a Babe. I think that's having a Babe Ruth versus Michael Jordan conversation. Almost.
No, I don't think so, man. I think Hogan.
Jean shorts.
There you.
Beers all night.
That's right, and middle fingers and 4-letter words. What?
Look, I love Stone Cold Steve Austin. I'm just saying, Hogan made wrestling twice.
No, he did.
You know what I mean? He really did.
He did. So the heel turn.
Yeah.
To NWO, which is what started it. But if you remember, we had this.
I'm not saying anybody's right or wrong in this conversation.
If you remember
it's subjective,
what happened, if you remember what happened, NWO, right? That heel turn.
Yeah.
NWO is the hottest thing. In that WrestleMania 14.
Yeah.
When it was Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold.
I remember exactly where I was.
On
Elizabeth Street in Delmar at my buddy Matt West's house. That was a wild night, by the way.
And they said
this shit was wild.
They said this is the beginning of the Stone Cold era, and they weren't wrong.
Yeah.
After that, they beat WCW in ratings every single night.
I would say Stone Cold had the best run for a period of time, bigger than anybody.
No, it wasn't the longest, but I'm saying his peak.
Yeah.
His peak is higher than Hogan's peak.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I definitely
I'm not
can
saying
see
that Hogan is probably the most recognizable star besides The Rock at this point. I think The Rock has become more. I think this generation of kids know him more for movies than they do wrestling. But I could say that, yes, Hogan's had that generational. But Austin's peak, there is never a star that will be hotter than he was when he was red hot. I mean, his peak was so high that it just was crazy. I mean, everybody. Think about it. He was in everything. He was on ESPN. Remember, he had the commercial when he was like, "I'll take one more," and they hit him with a chair shot.
Yeah.
Like, ESPN was very avid that he didn't want wrestling on there because it was quote unquote fake.
Yeah.
But Stone Cold was so generational that he was on their commercials.
Dude,
I mean, that's how nuts that is.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it.
And it's funny because it's like you think about like how much he took over culture back then.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about with Tommy with the JWO. We could literally go in school and stun people and nobody cared because everybody was so into it.
Yeah.
Could. I don't know anybody that could ever transcend culture to the point where you're just letting kids freely stun each other in the middle of hallways and everybody's okay with it.
Well,
I mean, like, so yeah, to your point, yeah, he took the world over. I mean,
and listen, he was on, it was such a short run, but again, how many, I would love to know the numbers of like how many viewers that were there for WrestleMania this weekend for him.
Yeah.
Viewer wise, because like I said, he's the only guy I think that brings back the other like the older generation.
Yeah.
Because the common fan, I mean, they don't know who Rick Boogs is. Like, I didn't even know who he was until like that was like, who is this dude playing the guitar?
Yeah.
But, and that's not me trying to, I just don't watch it as often.
Yeah.
You know, or I watch segments that are only interesting. And that's the other part is, think about it now. Like, this generation has it so great that they can go on YouTube the next morning and literally watch the segment that they want to watch and not have to watch a 2-hour tape of Raw, you know, or SmackDown. So it's kind of crazy how everything has kind of evolved into that short form of everything where, you know, you can get it on demand. I mean, we had that conversation about Peacock, the Peacock network, and buying it on pay-per-view. Yeah. Like, as a backup, because, like, it's streaming. But, like, when you go on to the app, dude, everything's at your fingertips. The whole library is at your fingertips. So it's kind of crazy to see. And I think, to your point, it is a community thing. And this weekend we had so much fun just
that's what it's all about.
Taking it in, dude.
Yeah.
And what do you think? And this is like, what do you think going forward? How can wrestling stay relevant going forward? Because
wrestling stay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, but at some point, and I'll finish this with this. At some point, those old stars can't come back. You can't squeeze any more juice out of that.
Well, no, because wrestling. So wrestling is a great example, kind of, to what we're almost doing on here.
Yeah.
Right. So they so like you said, nobody knows who Rick Boogs is.
Yeah.
Most people didn't know who Austin Theory was. Guarantee they know now. Yeah. Right. Because you bring the old stars back to put over the new stars, and that's what keeps carrying on the torches.
Yeah.
That's why, you know, most people always go out on top. But the honorable thing to do in wrestling is you lose, and that's how you go out.
Yeah.
You put over that next guy.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think that's how they carry on. I mean, you know, you might not have Austin come back, but Cena's got life left in him. Yeah. People know Cena. Roman's going to get to the point where he's done, then he's going to come back and he's going to put over the next guys. You know, the Braun Breakers, the Matt Riddles, you know, the Austin Theories. There was
a period of time where they ran out of making stars.
Yeah, I mean,
there was a period of time.
It's tough to make stars
because
at the end of the day, you can't. It's like we were talking about on episode 3.
Yeah.
The company can only do so much for you.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to make yourself.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Cody Rhodes.
Yeah.
Cody Rhodes left.
Yeah.
He was a low mid card guy. You know, they jobbed him out at the end of his career in WWE. Goes to Japan, does great things. Goes to AEW, does great things. Then they come back, pay him multi-million dollars, and he's, you know, has the best match of the night, you know?
That might have been the best match of his career.
So,
and I know some people are probably going to argue with that, but I don't know a bigger match for Cody Rhodes ever than that match right there.
Hot take is Seth Rollins is the new age HBK.
I believe
He's the new age Shawn Michaels. He can literally put you over. I mean, without him selling as much as he did.
I'm with you, yeah.
You don't get that match.
Yeah.
And that, again, that's what I've learned to appreciate from the Smarks is like an actual ring-worked match.
Yeah.
But again, they weren't, I mean, there was some crazy moves, but you don't see that every week.
Oh, when he hit him with the dream shake at the end.
Oh,
I mean, he just literally, that was brilliant. But back to, we were talking about, you know, you got to be willing to fight. Like everybody, this is what gets on my nerves. WWE, which they do have a very tight constraints on what you can and can't do. I get it. You know, they have to appeal to their sponsorships. So, you know, they probably don't give the creative freedom to the characters and to the performers like some of these other promotions. I understand that.
Yeah.
But at some point in time, you have to, as a worker, you need to be willing to go fight for what you want within that company. Look at Stone Cold. They brought in Stone Cold as the ringmaster. He probably would have just kept going on as the ringmaster. But he said, no, I want this character, and I'm going to do whatever it takes. And then McMahon says, okay, we'll go find a name. And he was trying to name him Chili McFrost and all this bullshit.
Yeah.
And he said, no, I want to be Stone Cold. So if it wasn't for him doing that, like, he never would have been this big. You know, like, I love Dean Ambrose, and maybe they didn't give him the flexibility, you know, to do what he could as Mox. But maybe he should have just kept fighting for it. You know what I mean? Look at Seth Rollins. I never was a Seth Rollins guy. And they have evolved his character to the point now that, I mean, I really like Rollins.
But I think,
you know,
don't you think that the best version of these characters is basically a amped up version of who they really are?
Exactly.
Like, because they're not acting. And that's what, like, when you get away from acting and you're just who you are, naturally it shows through. And that's why people love Stone Cold. That's why they love The Rock. That's why they love all of those old characters in the Attitude Era, because that's what they were. They were just amped. Literally, they would just tell you, like, dude, be yourself. Just put 10 on it and go out there.
And to the point of you know, the Smarks, back then they had more freedom to say and do what they wanted. They didn't have to follow a script as much. So, like, I can understand why people like an AEW or some of these other promotions, because there's not as much control over the scripts and the guys do have more freedom to be themselves. Yeah. And I wish WWE would introduce some more of that, you know, back into their product, and hopefully it does evolve to that point again. But either way, regardless if you're scripted or not, you need to be willing to go fight for what you want, because you can't rely on a company to do everything for you.
Oh, 100%. You have to be able to make it on your own. I mean, they have the machine that they can put behind you. You know, they can put that, but you got to make yourself.
You got to reach out and grab the brass ring.
Yeah, and you know, and if you're not willing to do that, that's what happens. The one thing I will say is, you know, if you have guys booking themselves, they're going to book. Here's the thing: you need somebody who
you wind up with WCW.
Unobject. That's why there is no more. So you need somebody in the room to say, yeah, let's not do that, because if you let people book themselves, what's going to end up happening is, or what could happen is, the same thing that happened in WCW. Hogan's out here winning every week and he's burying talent. Which is not, you know, dude, if my dad hears me say that, he's going to be pissed, because he's the biggest Hogan fan in the world.
Oh, shout! What's your dad, Harvey?
Yeah, Harvey.
Shout out to Harvey. I love Harvey. I love Hogan too, man.
Yeah, he's the biggest. I told you this weekend, you know, I was like, dude, he's such a Hogan fan. I was like, dude, so in Clearwater, or I think that's where the Hogan store is, they have like a statue outside of Hogan.
Yeah.
You know, ripping his shirt. I was like, my father has one of those in the living room.
Yeah.
At his house. Like, I sent you the picture this weekend. And I was like, see, I told you. Like, we took a picture in front of it. It's in our living room, or in my parents' living room. And it's so funny, because, like, whenever I go over to visit, it's just, he's got his Hogan stuff. He's got so much stuff.
Who does he think is better, Hogan or Stone Cold?
I
want him on the show to talk about this.
It's funny, because if you ask, dude, growing up, he was so into Stone Cold.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like, if you ask my sisters, it was like living with Stone Cold sometimes, because he would take Stone Cold isms and use them. You know what I mean? You'd be like, what the hell? Like, as a kid. Yeah. But, like, if you ask him now, I think because he grew up in that Hogan era, that to him, like we're talking about, that to him probably is his child. Like, that brings back those childhood memories of Hogan being the guy. My sister Tasha grew up, you know, loving Hogan. She had the workout sets, all that stuff.
I did too. I was like, I was obsessed with.
But that's Hogan. I think there's a nostalgia factor with him that, for that generation, I understand why they would love Hogan, because Hogan was the hero.
To me, when you ask the question, like, who was bigger, Stone Cold or Hogan, and when you say peak, nobody would ever peak to the point Austin was. There's no argument. I think that's a great argument to make. But I think there's a couple different conversations to have here with that. In my opinion, though, Hulk Hogan's the most pivotal wrestler in the history of wrestling, in my opinion, because without Hogan, that segment of fans like me, you never would even have them around to have to go to the Attitude Era. You know, he carried us, he created us as wrestling fans and allowed WWE to have the base in place to turn and evolve with us. And Hogan, the thing is Hogan, why to me he's the greatest, honestly. And I'm not saying from an in-ring perspective.
Yeah.
But why I think he should be considered the greatest is because he was the greatest babyface ever. That's that's undeniable.
Yeah.
But he also probably was the greatest heel ever, right? Because Stone Cold really was a heel, but he became more of an anti-hero.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like you can't really use it. Now, Ric Flair really probably was the greatest heel ever, but
yeah, I mean Ric Flair.
But people love to hate love to hate him.
Yeah.
Hogan was the greatest heel ever because he was so good that when he turned bad, it was like you were mad at him. That was the greatest heel turn in history, and there's only one heel turn that I will put on the same level as that, and that's Andre the Giant's heel turn.
Yeah.
When Andre the Giant turned on Hulk Hogan on Piper's Pit,
yeah,
to me that was emotionally devastating for me as a child
to see.
And I honestly think I could put both of those turns equally. Yeah. But when he turned on Hogan and he ripped that cross off his neck, I mean, I'm devastated as a kid because I'm like, that's his best friend.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they were literally best friends. And I tell you, who really made that whole segment, that whole program was Ventura, Heenan, and Piper.
Oh yeah. Man.
And the way they went and almost like I've got like Ventura and Heenan were on Andre's side, and then Piper was actually at that time saying, "I'm gonna get my guy." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was kind of on Hogan's side a little bit in that. But when he turned on Hogan, dude, I was devastated. And then obviously, you know, the heel turn that Hogan pulled to go NWO was just. It was unbelievable.
That's what wrote me in.
I mean, Eric Bischoff, I give a hat to him. He found lightning in a bottle with that. It did. That's what wrote me in. But if it wasn't for that moment, right?
Yeah.
There may have never been a Stone Cold either. Because I'm serious.
Pressure creates time.
Because they realized that this is what the audience wants now is edgier, bad guy. And that it allowed McMahon to give guys like Stone Cold, The Rock, Shawn Michaels, the Generation X, the ability and the freedom to go out and create this edgier product to compete against WCW. So that's why, in my opinion, I'm not saying his peak is better or worse. Yeah. I'm just saying Hogan is the GOAT. Because he made wrestling twice.
Listen, I would say this. For me.
And I love Austin.
For me, because so again, this is we got into this conversation, the LeBron Jordan thing.
Yeah.
For me, your Hogan is my Steve Austin because his peak was the highest. Even though what roped us all back into wrestling was that NWO, that heel turn, that peak of Steve Austin after he won that WrestleMania against Shawn Michaels, it felt like a whole different, like it was. I mean, when you were sitting down watching, I mean, we had 3 TVs. My father, we had Monday Night Football, WCW, and then WWE, WWF at the time on. And when I started realizing my father was, everything else was muted. WWE was literally, we just started gravitating to her after that because you wanted to see what was next with Stone Cold.
Yeah.
You wanted to see, and you know what, to your point, you know what made him? Jim Ross. Like, I made it
100%.
My God, here he comes.
You sorry son of a bitch.
Here he comes. He's walking, he's talking, you know.
Yeah.
And like when you would hear that as a kid, I mean, you were just getting amped up. He was amping you up, and it built the character, even bigger.
So it's funny, like where we're kind of going right now is actually an episode I'd like to do a whole episode on, and that's how we still see the world through our child lenses.
Yep.
And you and I could sit here and talk till we're blue in the face.
Yep.
I will never convince you that Hulk Hogan's better than Steve Austin.
Right.
And it's going to be hard for you to convince me that Stone Cold's better than Hogan because we saw these things as kids. Yeah. I didn't experience Austin as a kid. I experienced him as a teenager. Yeah. And I loved it. Yeah. But you didn't experience Hogan the way I did.
Exactly.
Because I was experiencing that when I was 5 or 6 years old, and everything is greater.
Yeah.
And that's what I was trying to really have that conversation with about LeBron and Jordan. One thing that drives me crazy about the LeBron and Jordan debate is, look, I'll tell you flat out. You asked me who the greatest basketball player ever is. It's Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
But when I think about it, like, I only saw Jordan through kid eyes.
Yeah.
So I tried to take a step back and say, you know, are my kid eyes right, or was it just that everything was bigger and greater. You know what I mean?
Well, you
on
put
that
everything
scale.
on a pedestal
Yeah.
at that point.
Well, of course, I saw Jordan as a teenager too, but either way, I grew through his career. And so
you
my
made
whole
a good argument about LeBron. I mean, I wouldn't have known you would have picked Jordan.
let me tell you something. My argument is never about who's better, LeBron or Michael Jordan. My argument is with the arguments that people try to make Michael Jordan
better.
Well, because I watch the NBA and I see a lot of flaws in those arguments.
Yeah.
So like it's funny because a guy over there the other day was asking me, he says, I'm having a hard time trying to figure out what you're arguing. Yeah. And I was like, my argument is not about who's better or worse. It's the arguments that people make, and we'll save that for another time because I would love to get into some of that.
But I think to wrap it all in a nice little bow, just appreciate what's in front of you.
Exactly. That was my point.
Just appreciate what's in front of you.
Yeah.
And what you get is just take it for what it is.
Yeah.
Don't complain, don't bitch. What could have been better. Just appreciate it for that moment that you're in.
Yeah.
Because that split moment can take you somewhere. Yeah. Right? As a kid, it takes you back. So appreciate it. Don't look at it through a lens where you have to judge everything for, is this serious and this it's a competition. Just appreciate it.
And that's exactly right. It's like why do I have to hate LeBron James because I love Michael Jordan? You know what I mean? It's like why can't I like LeBron because I love Jordan. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing with Roman. Like I love Roman because I see the same character, I did until he turned a heel, but I liked him before he was a heel because I wanted my child to have that thing that I rooted for in Hogan. You know what I mean? So it's like, why do we have to hate things just because we feel like they're conflicting with our childhood heroes? You know what I mean? The next generation has their own heroes. You know what I mean? And we need to learn, whether it's rap music, whether it's rock, whatever it is, we need to learn to appreciate what these kids love. It's like music. I don't mean to go everywhere, but I was saying how much I love Jay-Z, and you're saying how much you have like Lil Wayne. Yeah. We could sit here and argue all day long. We're not going to change each other's minds. I appreciate the fact that you love Lil Wayne. You appreciate the fact that I love Jay-Z. Yeah. And it's cool.
But
it's
for each era, there is for each era, there is a Hogan, there is an Austin, there is a Roman. And to that person in that generation, that is to them the key. That is their number one, the top of their discussion. And they're not wrong. Just like you're not wrong. Like my father, literally, my father would tell me, he's like, Hogan's the best wrestler alive. Or dead or alive. He's the best wrestler to ever do it.
Not technical.
And, no. But for me, I will never agree with that because to me, Austin was the peak. Even though I'm a huge Ric Flair fan. It was his peak to me was when I was growing up, when I was 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So, to wrap, just appreciate it.
So do we have to wrap this thing up?
Yep.
So look, I think, one of the reasons that we love wrestling so much and love sports and everything, it's not always about who's the best technician, right? Yeah. It's not always about, who's the best realtor, but sometimes it's about who could tell the best story.
Right.
And the story is important, the build up to things. And speaking of stories, we have a very, very special guest coming on the next episode, a man by the name of Paul Roseberry, a great friend of mine who lives in L.A. He's a stand-up comedian and also a realtor. I mean, you talk about bringing real estate and entertainment together. Paul Roseberry does just that, and he has some wild stories that he's going to share with us on the next episode, and we can't wait to have him on. And we apologize if you guys had to sit through a bunch of wrestling today with us nerds, but we love talking about it. We're passionate about it, and
we can't help it.
Yeah.
So until next time.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's prop culture. Oh, hell yeah.
Oh, hell